Welcome back to Apocalypse Steve and day 3 of this unreliable tale. Last episode, Steve made great progress finding a new base in an old auto shop. He did have a rather intense encounter with some zombified dogs, but thankfully he lives to see another day. As the sun rises, Steve is eager to get out for a day of looting. With his base established, he now has endless storage for whatever he finds out in the Wasteland. He starts his day with a spot of parkour. Not the most conventional way of getting around, but he felt cool jumping from one roof to another. On his way down, he found an old backpack which contained the recipe for coffee seeds. How strange, but who doesn't love coffee? With his brain full of coffee knowledge, he headed out, closing the door behind him, like a good boy. Steve absolutely nails his first few kills of the day, before heading over to the pharmacy which he neglected to loot yesterday. He heads into some sort of back room, which has plenty of shipping crates to dig through. At the end of the hall, there was a gigantic hole in the ground. How bizarre. Steve contemplates his next move, before misquoting the one-hit wonder by Yaz.
Well, the only way is down.
Not sure that's right, Steve, but it would be foolish not to investigate what lies below. Beneath the pharmacy, there seemed to be a cave network of sorts. Knowing full well he was very much backed into a corner, Steve tread very carefully. Thanks to an initial sneak attack, this massive biker dude only took a few hits to take down. He was then confronted by a lady in a lovely little black number. Around the next corner, he finds multiple metal barrels. Despite their toxic labeling, they contain copious amounts of fuel, something that will definitely come in handy further down the line. Exiting the cave, he now found himself in some sort of lab.
This must connect back to the pharmacy,
he thought.
Although, I wonder what kind of chemistry they were doing down here.
Well, judging by the dingy setup and massive hole in the wall leading to a cave, I'm going to guess not the legal kind, Steve. Lost in his thoughts, he almost completely missed the terrifying hazmat zombie 2 feet away from him. Steve retreated and dealt with the Zed, but it would seem he'd awoken plenty more further ahead. As he made his way upstairs, more coverall-clad zombies fell from the ceiling, adding to the already alarming amount of commotion coming from the next room. Steve headed back downstairs to put some space between him and the undead and prepare himself for an onslaught. And an onslaught there was. With only 5 arrows, he was going to have to be smart. He took out the first 2 and retrieved his arrows. Reuse, recycle, eh, Steve? He went full club mode with the next few, but was quickly being backed into a corner. Caught on a rock, Steve was smacked thrice.
Shoot.
This is not the time to be playing silly biscuits, Steve. Pull yourself together. He consumed some honey to fight off any cooties he might have got from her, and ate some tinned pears because, well, he was peckish. Ignoring the remaining smacks and moans coming from elsewhere, Steve cracked on with his looting, satisfied he was safe, for now. He searched the staff kitchen, filling his little rucksack to the brim. Knowing full well there was plenty more to search, he headed back home to unload from his first trip. Steve had retrieved so much already it was too much to fit in his tiny storage chest, so he constructed a massive crate to cram even more goodies into. Something you'll soon learn about Steve is that above pretty much anything else, he loves organisation. It pleases him. In the first step of organising his storage, he began by separating food, medicine and ammunition into one container, and everything else went into his new crate. With a gigantic weight quite literally lifted off of his shoulders, he ventured back out. Although not back to the pharmacy just yet, no, you see, Steve was already missing the company of others, so decided to pop back to see his new friend, Trader Joel. Although, full clarity, his ADHD did get the better of him and he got distracted by some trees. Well, you can never have too much wood, I suppose. He also ran into an ambulance, presumably the same ambulance he allegedly flew out of. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you clearly weren't paying attention in episode 1. Back at Joel's trading post, they caught up on recent events. You know, all the hot post-apocalyptic gossip. Steve also had a burning question for Joel.
So, you said the Zeds don't run during the day.
That's right.
But this one guy, he had glowing eyes, and my gosh, could he take a beating.
Ah, you found yourself a feral.
A feral?
They're not too common, but if you see those orange eyes, you're in for some fun. They'll come at you full speed, day or night, don't matter.
Oh, great. More things for me to worry about. Anything else I should be wary of?
Probably, but you don't expect me to remember everything, right? But I'll always be here if you have any more questions.
Thanks, Joel.
Oh, before I forget, you ever built a forge?
A forge? Of course I haven't.
It's super simple. It's pretty much essential these days. Here's what you do.
And with that, Steve headed out to gather what he needed to make a forge. He had built a pretentious clay oven for his patio, so this shouldn't be too difficult for him. Back at base, he consolidated what he had, which was mostly all he needed, except some leather. But he knew he'd seen some delightful leather seats in the reception. Well remembered, Steve. With all the items he requires, he headed in to assemble his fancy new forge.
Look how fancy it is.
With his fancy new forge, he figured he could probably make some cooking accessories like a grill and a cooking pot. Just think of all the delightful things he can make with those. Did I mention Steve was also a fantastic cook?
I am one fantastic cook.
Alright Steve, no need to brag. Putting his brand new pot and grill to the test, he decided to cook some glorious bacon and eggs, corn on the cob, and grilled meat. What a feast! With the crackling of his forge and campfire, along with the start of his new storage system, Steve felt good, confident in fact, like things might just be alright. As it turned 8:30, Steve figured he had enough time to pop back over to finish looting the pharmacy. He searched every shelf he could, retrieving all sorts of medical supplies before heading up onto the roof. There were a couple of Zeds up here, but nothing Steve couldn't handle, especially with the 1-2 punch technique. With the final kill, Steve saw something that made him double take.
Yep, that was his arm that fell off. Gross.
And now for his reward. A mountain of crates and stashes all for him. Well deserved, Steve. In his utter delight, he lost track of time.
Shoot, it's 10 o'clock.
Steve's never been out past 10 before. This is what curfews are for, Steve. But he wasn't being deterred. He continued to loot, just quietly. With everything searched bar a locked box, he headed back home, hoping he wouldn't encounter anything on his way back. Unfortunately, he did awaken someone, but he was not sticking around to find out who. He disappeared faster than a toupee on a windy day. Back home, he closed the doors, climbed his ladder, and settled in for the night. He simply couldn't sleep without doing a touch more organising though. He constructed yet another crate, this one explicitly for food, drink, and medicine. By this point, Steve was starving, but thankfully he had a plethora of food, cooked and ready to eat, so he indulged. And so you should, Steve. Another productive day.
You know what? I think I got this. I think I might just be okay.
I hope so, Steve. I really do. Until next time.